Welcome to the O Show with Orlana Darkins Drewery, your connection to events, topical interests, issues, and the movers and shakers in our world, and the opportunity to learn things that make you say, oh. Today, I am honored to have Patricia Roberts, an accomplished author and national expert on Internal Revenue Code 529 plans, joining us today. Patricia's caregiving journey began in childhood and has profoundly shaped her life and experience. In addition to helping thousands of families prepare for higher education expenses with 529 college savings plans, Patricia also supports individuals with disabilities and their caregivers by educating them on the benefits of 529 ABLE plans. In celebration of November being National Caregiver Month, Patricia will share her personal experiences, the lessons learned, and the essential strategies that caregivers can use to navigate the challenges and joys of this role. Patricia, welcome to the O Show.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here with you. And thanks for covering this really important topic.
Thank you so much for your time. I'm so excited to dive in. We're going to start at a very early age. We're going to go way back. Your caregiving journey began at a very young age under challenging circumstances. Can you share what that experience was like for you as a 10-year-old stepping into a leadership and caregiving role?
Yes, I can share that with you. So as you said, at the age of 10, the circumstances in my family changed dramatically and quite suddenly upon the disappearance of our father, who left my mom, a housewife at the time, with 4 children, one of whom was developmentally disabled. He also left us with a home about to go into foreclosure, no money in the bank, and 2 automobiles about to become repossessed. Our mom tried her very best to pull it together. Back in the 70s, women did not have money in their own name, nor could they have credit in their own name. And having followed my father's request that she be a housekeeper, homemaker, she really didn't have current career skills, but she did all she could to keep us afloat, find us another place to live. But that stress caused her to become critically ill. And here's where my caregiving began. She suffered a stroke, a number of many other major medical issues, and was in and out of intensive care in the hospital for years. So I stepped up as the youngest child. I don't know how the youngest child somehow landed in a leadership role, but my other 3 siblings were not handling the situation particularly well, right? With an absent father and now an absent mother. And I did all I could to really, help with the situation. And certainly those times when my mom got home from the hospital, to do what I could to make her as comfortable as possible and to make sure she was taking her medicine, eating well, although we didn't have much food, and also caring for my siblings. Even though they were older, they needed a little extra help in, maneuvering through their own existence. And I supported them as well, with a particular focus on that one brother who's the oldest in the family, but in some ways felt like a younger brother, the way his needs. Yes. And then, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, as I had mentioned to you when we were first chatting, my mom lived to 88 and a half years. So she must have been in her 40s when all of that happened. She managed to live another, 4 decades, which I'm very proud of. And I really do feel my efforts in supporting her were part of that success. She eventually did die in 2016. I saw her through to her very last breath. And then, of course, upon her passing, assumed increased responsibility for that brother of mine who had always lived with her. And that's where we are today.
Now, as you mentioned, we had kind of chatted before this interview. You shared that you had an epiphany regarding self-care. Can you tell us more about that realization and how it has changed your approach to both caregiving and your personal well-being?
Sure. I must admit, as I'm sure other caregivers would admit as well, that these many, many years, these decades of caregiving have taken a toll on me. I found myself run down at times. I found my own life very much on the back burner while taking care of others, not just my mom and my brother, my own child, friends and neighbors. It's often, I should say, not always, it's often a woman, often a mom that is leaned upon when others are in need of care. And I realized at some point in time, I think it's been over the past 2 years or so, that wait a minute, I am an exceptional caregiver of others. I have seen my mom through very challenging circumstances, my brother, other loved ones, and that level of expertise, that level of diligence and care and love and responsibility can also be applied to me. I can take that level of commitment. I would never drop the ball on a loved one. I would never put a loved one's needs on the back burner. So some of the things I was doing for myself, which was not following through on commitments that I'd made large and small to take better care of me, I realized if I applied that same level of diligence that I had applied to others to myself, I could start doing that. And I have. And I'm very, very proud of that. So I feel like within myself and other caregivers, I think if they reflect, will realize they've got everything they need because they've demonstrated it by helping others. They've got everything they need to now direct that to their own well-being and to follow through for themselves and to make sure they get to the appointments they need to get to and that they are nourished and well taken care of. And I think that's been a huge epiphany for me. There's nothing more I need. I've got it all. I just need to remember that I can apply it to myself. And it feels great. But at the times when I'm able to do that, it's not all the time. Some of the time, I can put myself first and I can take care of my own needs. And I think it's absolutely essential as a mom for my child to see me modeling healthy self-care. That child of mine, would witness me getting run down and running around and caring for everyone else. Better for him to see, although I am caring for others, I'm also taking care of myself in the process. I think that's very important.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point because you're right. When you are the caregiver, you're making sure that other person is taking their medicine, they're getting fresh air, they're eating wholesome food. And, why wouldn't you do that to yourself? Even in the airplane, they say, if you're with a child, make sure you put their mask on first. But you also have to take care of yourself as well. But yeah, that is a very good point. In terms of taking care of yourself, what advice would you give others who are struggling to balance caregiving, work, and personal life? And are there any specific strategies or practices that you found particularly helpful?
Yeah. As you just mentioned, that putting your mask on first is a strategy and one that should be employed to the extent it's possible to employ it. Certainly in an emergency situation, someone has fallen, something really seriously has gone wrong. You're disregarding your own need at the moment to the extent you need to immediately tend to that other person. But to the extent there's a little gray area, you've got a little time, getting yourself better positioned first, whether that's running to the bathroom for a minute, getting yourself a drink of water, stepping back and thinking, what options do we have here? That putting your own mask on first can really be beneficial at those times where you've got a little bit of leverage in terms of acting. I think when you've grown up in a situation like mine, you could be hypervigilant. You could be looking for any circumstance where you need to jump in immediately, and your tendency may not need necessarily be to pause for a moment and assess the situation, think about what you need before you go into action. So I do suggest exactly what you said about putting the mask on first. The other thing I suggest is at the start of every day, start the day with yourself in mind first. Do not look at technology when you first wake up in the morning. For me, that's down a rabbit hole. Undoubtedly, there's been a variety of things that may have happened, small and large, that now suddenly need my attention. And starting off the day, jumping right into someone else's needs, to the extent they're not urgent, really is not good from my perspective. So I suggest getting that phone and computer out of the way and starting your day. I start my day with prayer before I even get out of bed. And when I'm making my bed, at each four corners of the bed, I declare something I'm grateful for. That fills my cup a bit before anything else begins. And then I keep it silent for a bit to do a little bit of movement, a bit of meditation, a cup of tea, whatever works for you. Set aside that time at the start of the day because you may not get it later in the day. And it really just feels great to start in that sort of frame of mind. The other thing I would say is do not go it alone. It feels very isolating to be particularly a family caregiver. It may feel a little different if you are a paid caregiver or a third party caring for someone that you're not well acquainted with. But when you're caring for a loved one as a family member, whether or not you've got siblings that are willing to help, and many or some will have those who are not willing to help, or whether or not you've got neighbors who are willing to help or not, I assure you there is someone or a number of people that can lend a hand to you. And I would say definitely try to find out who those are. There is a Department of Aging, I believe, in every community and every state that could give you some guidance. There may be some social organizations that help caregivers, Facebook groups, etc. You will have people in your life who want to help. They may not be the people you wish they were necessarily, like a relative who you think should be stepping up, but there are people in your community, at your church, in some social organization that can lend you a hand. Let them do it. Get the help you need. See if your loved one qualifies for some form of assistance where a third-party caregiving resource can come in and help. Now, that comes with its own challenges. You've got to oversee people when they're caring for your loved one. But if you can be as specific as possible about what you need, when individuals say, gee, I'd love to lend a hand, let them know you need some research on this topic. Mom needs a ride to this particular appointment on this particular day. I think that can go a long way.
And then the other, let me jump in real quick because you talked about other resources. I had mentioned at the top of the show, you have extensive knowledge of 529 ABLE plans. And I know I'm not familiar with this, but for our listeners also who may not be familiar, could you explain what these plans are and how they could benefit individuals with disabilities and their caregivers?
Sure. So under Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code, some may recognize the fact that there are these college savings plans accounts where individuals can save on a tax-deferred basis for higher education expenses. They've been around almost 30 years, and even at that, nearly 2/3 of Americans don't know what they are. So even a lesser portion of Americans know about this newer development under Section 529 of the Internal Revenue Code, and that is the development of these accounts that are called ABLE accounts. ABLE stands for Achieving a Better Life Experience, and these were developed through legislation 10 years ago in 2014, and they allow individuals who are significantly disabled, not with a type of disability that's going to resolve itself in short or long term, but those with significant disabilities who developed their disability before the age of 26. So the age of onset had to be before 26. Those individuals can now, thanks to these ABLE accounts, save on a tax-deferred basis for anything that can benefit the situation in which they find themselves. So this could be assistive technology. It could be transportation. It could be a home health aid. It could be education. It could be a vehicle, adaptive vehicle that you may need. In 2026, that age of onset is going to rise to age 46, which will put a lot more people eligible for these ABLE accounts. But I do suggest members of your audience, if they do have an individual in their life, or if they themselves have a significant disability, that they look into these ABLE plan accounts to see if they might be able to save on a tax advantage basis. What's great about these accounts, my brother now has one, is that the balance in the account, the contributions to the account do not count against him for his needs-based benefits. So he receives SSI and Medicaid. Perhaps he has a voucher for housing or for, food and nutrition. They do not count the balance in these ABLE plans towards the qualification for those purposes. And that's great because previously individuals with disabilities could not have much money in their own name without risking the loss of benefits. So they weren't able to save. So these are good. This is a good resource to know about. There's a website called abletoday.org, abletoday.org, that I would recommend visiting, and I could give you some more information for your show notes for those who are interested in those types of accounts.
I love it. I'm going to post it right now, abletoday.org. For more information. Also, you have a website that people can go to as well if they want to follow up with you, and that is giftofcollege.com. If you're watching us on the screen, if you're listening, it's giftofcollege.com. Patricia Roberts, author and national expert on Internal Revenue Code 529 plans and caregiver. Thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm so happy to be here with you, and I want caregivers to take better care of themselves. I've just seen some research that talks about just the number of caregivers that pre-decease die before the adult person they were caring for. We cannot die before the individual we're caring for. We want to live a long and healthy life. Let's take better care of ourselves.
Well said. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you all for listening in to the Show with Orlana Darkins Drewery. Until next time, keep shining. Up next, I'll be talking to Sarah Elise Bobo, a distinguished stress management consultant, joining me in recognition of National Caregiver Month this November. Stay tuned. With Orlana Darkins Drewery, your connection to events, top interests, issues, and the movers and shakers in our world, and the opportunity to learn things that make you say, oh. Today, I'm excited to have Sarah Elise Bobo, a distinguished stress management consultant, joining us in recognition of National Caregiver Month this November. Sarah is the founder and CEO of Live Well, Enhance You, LLC, a company dedicated to helping individuals and organizations develop innovative solutions for optimal living. That's how I'm trying to live. With over 15 years of experience and a background that blends musical theater performance with a deep understanding of health and wellness, Sarah brings a unique perspective to the challenges of caregiving. Sarah has been featured on major platforms such as The List, WGN Living Healthy, and WGN Around Town segment as a stress management expert. She is also the host of Stress-Free Solutions podcast and has been highlighted in outlets like Us Weekly, BuzzFeed, Business Insider, and much, much more. Today, Sarah will share her insights on managing the stress of caregiving, setting boundaries, seeking support, and practicing self-care. Sarah, welcome to the Show.
Thank you, Orlana. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Sarah, your journey in stress management is impressive. Can you tell us what inspired you to transition from musical theater performance to becoming a stress management consultant?
Yeah. So while I was auditioning for shows and everything, something I found very hard to do was balance everything. On the side, I would be teaching Pilates, auditioning for shows, writing musicals, like one-woman shows. It was a crazy time. And then it became even more insane when I had found out my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 kidney cancer. It went from finding out his diagnosis to finding out that it had metastasized. And we knew instantly that this wasn't going to be a far journey for us. It was going to be short and quick. And so I didn't know anything about kidney cancer. And that was when I was like, you know what? I'm going to understand as much as possible. But during that time, there were so many obstacles that I found out with caregiving. Obviously, my mom was the main caregiver, but I was the support system too. So that was when I was like, okay, stress management is so important. And when he passed, I got my certification at the Integrative Institute of Nutrition, where I discovered what health and wellness really meant. And it was more than just nutrition. It was self-care and just understanding your own needs. So it was interesting because I was introduced to it basically when my dad was sick.
And obviously, as you mentioned, that is, you're already stressed. And then the diagnosis of your dad added additional stress onto that. What strategies do you recommend for caregivers to effectively organize their responsibilities without feeling overwhelmed?
Well, first off, we got to define those boundaries. And that can look a bunch of different ways. But ask yourself, what are you in control of and what are you not? And then start to set those boundaries. And there's all different types of boundaries. There's physical, emotional, spiritual, financial, time, non-negotiables. And you have to look at every area, those specific 6, and ask yourself, what are my boundaries for all of those? And you got to be very clear and concise so that you can communicate it to your loved ones. For me, that looks like communicating with our extended family and friends, because at times my dad wanted to have some peace and quiet. At other times he wanted to be social and enjoy. Then there were times where we had to share with them what was going on with his prognosis and everything, and what they were going to do long term. So it's a lot of negotiation too, because at times people are going to want to get in there and say, this is what I want. And at times you're going to have to say, no, I can't give that to you at this moment because I need to make time for my loved ones and myself. I have to do self-care. So self-care, spiritual self-care would be my number 2. And then, of course, number 3 would be asking for support from your loved ones and from your friends, because during that time, it's so essential to have help so that you can stay organized and you can also keep your loved one's spirit up during this time.
You mentioned support from family and friends. Did you, or what advice would you have for someone who, they would naturally assume, of course, my family is going to support. How do you handle it if the people that you really think should support you, they're not there?
Yeah. And for a lot of people, I have learned from, talking with people at the Kidney Cancer Association and other organizations that it's caregiving is so difficult because people aren't listening to what the caregivers are saying, and they want to give their 2 cents on what you should do. But your loved one is the one that wants certain care, so you have to honor it. It's their decision, and that's something that's so important. So when you ask for support, you're also asking them to take a pause before they speak, because they have to know the situation you're in is not easy as well.
So you talked about, you mentioned self-care several times, but self-care can oftentimes take a back seat when caring for others. So how can caregivers prioritize self-care in their daily routines without feeling guilty or selfish?
Well, I would say, because this was something that I learned about, in order to be 100% there for your loved one, you need that time for yourself. So for me, that at first just looked like getting myself in a corner and creating like a sanctuary space, a place that I could just breathe, reflect, chill, so that I can actually hear what the doctors were saying. So self-care is if you don't help yourself, you're not going to be able to help the person that needs you the most, because they can't necessarily listen to every little thing. They might have misheard something and they need another voice and ear in there. So spiritual self-care, set an intention for yourself. So let's say you decide, I'm going to go to a workout class or get a massage. What you are doing in that situation is doing something lovely for your body, right? So set an intention before you go in there. Instead of saying, oh, I'm just getting this workout in so that I'll feel better, say, this is giving me so much joy. My body is in need of this, and therefore I'm going to be the best caregiver ever because I'm setting this time for myself now. So that way you don't feel the guilt. You're going in there with a clear intention.
How do you feel about let me start over. So your background is also nutrition, and you talked a lot about self-care spiritually. How does nutrition play a role in the life of a caregiver? You would think that would be kind of common sense, but
it's not. And I'll be honest, when we were going through this, we went to Jimmy John's. But we still needed like home cooked meals. So that's actually where support can be very helpful. I wish that we would have asked more, because I know that people would have brought us home cooked meals because we had a great community. But don't be afraid to be like, I have not eaten well the past week because we've just gone from appointment to appointments, and just don't be afraid, because they'll be like, oh, can we take you for like an hour just to go get, a nice meal, or come over to our house for this evening after, visitors can't be there anymore, and just spend some time with friends. And when you're nourishing yourself with nutrition and friendship, you're nourishing not only your body, but your soul too.
And communication is key, because as caregivers, you feel like you have to be the superhero, and you really don't. Like, I don't know what that is, but you really feel like you have to be the superhero to the person you're caring for, and I don't know, your friends and family. But really, to be an effective caregiver, communication is key. Like, people want to help you, but they need direction on how you need help and where. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree 100%. 100%.
And you mentioned too, like, until you said you needed a home cooked meal, did you get one?
Oh, yeah. And you know what was crazy? Then I got other things that I did not ask for. I'll never forget this. A couple of my clients sent me train tickets so that I could spend more time with my dad. They're like, go home this weekend. Stop working. We know that you're a great trainer and you're always here for us. And it meant the world to me to be able to spend more quality time with my father during that. I'll never forget it. And a lot of those people are still my clients today.
Can you share some specific like improvisation techniques or exercises that caregivers can use to stay adaptable and connected in high stress situations?
The idea of yes and, which is the foundational principle of improvisation, saying, like, you always would say no to things. But sometimes we need to actually say yes, and there's this that's happening, and there's this problem that's occurring, because people are more receptive to hearing that. No cuts them off from you, from your loved one. And that's not necessarily what we want, even though at the time we're feeling that, because we're not getting that self-care. We're not taking the time for our loved ones to communicate like what's going on with you too. So say yes and you'll be surprised what happens with that.
So give an example of a yes and.
Okay, an example would be if you were, I'm just going to take my situation, is I was saying yes to constantly teaching and I needed to spend time with my father, right? So I said, yes, I would love to teach on this Saturday, but there's a lot going on right now and I would be happy to change it to another day so that I could see my father. What happened as a result was they sent me 2 train tickets, go see your dad.
Nice.
And I was able to teach them on a Thursday. So they were adaptable. I was adaptable and I got to have quality time. So that would be an example.
Okay, I like that. So
Yeah.
finally, Sarah, for those new to caregiving or maybe facing significant stress, what are some immediate steps that they can take to create a more balanced and supportive caregiving experience?
Well, I know everyone talks about breathing and, obviously taking that time to breathe is essential, but I would transcend to a different place. So what I mean by that, I talked about a sanctuary space, but you want almost like this mental oasis that you can create. So during a time of stress, picture your favorite place. Maybe it's on a beach somewhere, reading a book, drinking coffee or a mojito, whatever you choose, and just take your moment to go there and be in that space to calm your nervous system down for a good couple of minutes. Maybe if you're really good at it, like you could be there for 10 minutes and just live in that state. Just honor it.
Okay. Sarah Elise Bobo, founder and CEO of Live Well, Enhance You. Thank you so much for sharing today. And for more information, you can visit her website, which is liveWellEnhanceYou.com. Sarah, thank you so much.
My gosh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, Orlana.
Thank you all for listening in to the O Show with Orlana Darkins Drewery. Until next time, keep shining.